So this is a sad story about Walter Wallace Jr. So before I even read this article, um, uh, Philadelphia, and I believe this is where it's coming from right now, they're having a civil unrest. There are protesters and there are people that are out there and they're unhappy. And I'm about to read this article because this article pretty much sheds some light as to why the protesters and a lot of people are very unhappy about what happened to Walter Wallace Jr. So, just to tell you a little bit of background about this young man that was fatally shot 14 times by law enforcement. It was said that he, prior to the incident happening, that he had mental issues. And I guess he had a mental breakdown, something happened. And he was wielding a knife. And someone had called an ambulance. They were trying to seek help for him. Unfortunately, he met his demise through law enforcement, whom shot him 14 times. And now he's dead. And so a lot of people saw this was unjustly handled, the situation, being so that this man had a history of mental illness. And law enforcement actually knew it. And so this is an unusual story, having law enforcement already be aware that the person has a history of mental illness, but decide to still shoot him 14 times. So that is why you see what you see happening. If you see anything about Philadelphia, and there's protesters and there's rioting, but they paint the picture of the protesters as being lawless and not knowing the background of the story. And this is pretty much one of many articles. So it says police knew Walter Wallace Jr. And it says they knew he was having a mental health crisis or a mental health crisis and visited his house 3 times the day that he was fatally shot and laughed at his family. At one point, his mother basically said this. So they did not look at the situation in an empathetic manner. They looked at it like, oh well, he's just another person that we've unjustly, apprehended and killed. So this is by Ashley Coleman out of The Insider. And so I believe these are the people that are the parents. So this is Walter Wallace Jr.'s parents. Walter Wallace Sr. that's pictured at the left, and Kathy Wallace, who is the mother, pictured at the right, giving a Tuesday right. At the right, she's pictured here. And she was giving a press conference at their house. They were at their house and they were basically explaining the situation. So Walter Wallace Jr., he was 27 years old. He was shot dead by 2 Philadelphia police officers Monday afternoon as he was he walked towards them, and he was holding a knife. And so his parents held a press conference on Tuesday saying that the police were aware that the son had mental illness, he had a mental health crisis, and that officers had been called to his house 3 times on Monday. So they already were prepped. They knew that this man had a background of mental issues. So Wallace's mother, Kathy, said that during one of the visits, the officers stood there and laughed at us, according to the Associated Press. So on the final call, Wallace's brother had called for an ambulance, but the police officers, were sent instead to the scene, and the family attorney said this. And so Wallace was the father of 9 children and expecting a 10th when he died. His wife, whom he had married earlier this month, was due to be induced in labor on Wednesday. So, 27-year-old black man who was shot and killed by police officers in Philadelphia on Monday was having a mental health crisis, and the officers were aware of this, his parents had told the reporters. So 2 officers fired more than a dozen shots at Walter Wallace Jr. on Monday afternoon. He walked towards them with a knife and ignored the repeated request to put the weapon down, the police said. So Wallace later died at the hospital. A bystander with video showed Wallace's mother trying to defuse this situation, so she was there around the time of the incident in the moments before the shooting. And so I was telling the police to stop, don't shoot my son, and they paid me no mind, and they just shot him anyway. Wallace's mother, Kathy, told reporters at her home on Tuesday night, according to the Fox 29. So this is a singer, I believe, if I'm not sure. It says Common, and he's on Twitter and basically showing the pictures. Walter Wallace Jr., a twin father and son, was shot 10 times by police in front of his mom, who was trying to de-escalate the situation in Philly. These officers must be held accountable, and this unjust system must be radically transformed. And what have we been talking about lately is police reform. Ice Cube, myself, and some other people have taken to Twitter. We've been talking a lot about police reform. We've been talking about how things should be changed in the system. There's been a lot of people that have been talking about these type of incidences, and this is yet but another example of how things need to change dramatically. And so Wallace's father, Walter Wallace Sr., said that he also witnessed the shooting. So I can't even sleep at night. Every night that I close, or every time that I close my eyes, I got flashbacks of multiple shots. So Wallace Sr. said on Tuesday night, this was according to the WPVI, I believe that's a Philly station. So at the news conference, Wallace's mother said the police were aware of her son's mental health crises, that the officers had been called to the house 3 times earlier on that day that he was killed. So during one of the visits, the officers stood there and laughed at us, according to the Associated Press. So on the final 911 call, Wallace's brother requested the ambulance instead of the officers, but the police were sent instead. And so the family's attorney said this. So this is Shaka Johnson, who said this at a news conference. So I find it extremely emotionally taxing to think about how you can call for an assistance and wind up with the people who you called and end up killing them instead of helping you. And I believe that's the way they want to phrase it. But Johnson said, according to Fox 29, I can't even conceive the concept. So it's not clear if the 2 officers who shot Walter Wallace were among those who had visited the house earlier in that day. So it could have been a different set of officers. We're not sure. So the story is still developing, but Johnson added that the doctor had been helping Wallace Jr. with his mental illness, and that he was taking a mood stabilizer, which is called lithium. And so there's a CBS Philly report. So family questions why lethal force was used at all. Looking at the situation, you have officers that come to a scene. First of all, they weren't the ones that they wanted to come to the scene. They wanted EMS or, like somebody that was medically trained or in health issues, mental health crises experts, someone that could probably restrain him so that they would not have to use deadly force. This is what I'm believing that they were more looking for. But instead, they got law enforcement who is not really trained in that. I don't believe they're trained unless they have like maybe a negotiator. I don't even know if they're trained in that. But still, you would think even law enforcement would decide, let's not use the deadly force, let's use, our tactical, some kind of restraint or something, some kind of restraint, like maybe like pin him down and take the knife from him. something like that, rather than shoot him that many times. So that's my thoughts. I wonder about a lot of these shootings. Why they can't use some other style of technique to actually pin the person to a point, not pin him down like they did George Floyd to kill him, but somehow be able to tackle him and put him in a restraint and take the weapon away from him and just sit him in the back of a car, with the handcuffs until they have proper authorities come and handle the situation, rather than taking a gun and just shooting them. So at Tuesday's news conference, Philadelphia Police Commissioner Danielle Outlaw said neither officer had a taser or a similar device on them at the time of the shooting, adding that the department had previously tried to give funding to give more officers the kinds of tools. This was AP that reported this, and so you see people that are in the streets, and I guess this is when, before the unrest took place, this is when people were made aware of the situation. So the protesters and the police were in riot gear, and they came face to face during this unrest in Philadelphia. This was on Tuesday night. So according to Associated Press, police officials could not confirm what kind of information had been given to the officers who were dispatched to Walter Wallace's Jr.'s home during the fatal shooting incident, whether they were told that he had mental illness or not. And so that's to be investigated, of course. So they also could not confirm how many calls that they received from that address on Monday. So Wallace has had several run-ins with police. So he's had a history where he's had run-ins with law enforcement over the years, according to a criminal record obtained. Of course, they're going to get that because they look at your background. So most recently in March, he was arrested after allegedly calling the mother of his child and threatening her So I'll shoot you and the house up, and that was in quotes, allegedly. So NBC Philadelphia also found records of arrests. This was in 2019, 2016. They went all the way back to 2013, where issues ranging from allegedly holding a gun to a woman's head during a robbery and violating the protection order of his mother that was had on him by allegedly punching her and threatening to shoot her as well. So apparently what they're uncovering, he's had a history of breakdowns, mental illness, to where he becomes violent. And so he was the father of 9 children, Walter Wallace. He was the father of 9 children, and 3 of his sons appeared briefly at the Tuesday news conference. This was Fox 29 that reported this. The family told NBC Philadelphia that Wallace had gotten married earlier that month, and his wife Dominique was pregnant and due to be induced into labor on Wednesday, according to Associated Press. And so Wallace's killing has prompted 2 consecutive nights of protest in Philadelphia. So on Tuesday night, hundreds of people took part in a peaceful march through the West Philadelphia, is where this is happening, to a local police precinct. So later, there were reports of a few clashes between police and looting in the East Philadelphia, according to Associated Press. The unrest started almost immediately after Wallace's death. And this was on Monday night, with police arresting more than about 90 people. So this was Monday night and Tuesday morning. Associated Press reported so 30 police officers have also been injured, according to this, including a female officer who was run over by a pickup truck and remains in hospital for a broken leg. And so the 2 officers who shot Walter Wallace have been taken off the street duty. Outlaw said. So I had to look at that when it said outlaw. I'm like, wait a minute. So Tuesday, Outlaw said that Tuesday her office is conducting a risk assessment to see if it is possible to release their names. So this was read the original article out of the Insider. So this is yet but another unfortunate situation. So they uncovered the behavior of this man, and they uncovered his mental health crises and his illness. So there was a story behind him and some things that he was going through. Very troubled, and he was on medication. And it looked to be if he was off his medication that he would go into these mental breakdowns. So he has some other issues going on. So this has yet to be a developing story. It's unfortunate that this man, instead of getting the proper help, that he met his demise at more than a dozen gunshot wounds. So this is why it's important for, I believe, not only for, I mean, you look at the dynamics of the situation, not only black men, but the women that he was involved with, they were probably going through something as well. You know, with him being with someone that has mental illness and then being in a relationship with someone like that, and then the kids, now they're without a father. Then you also look at the man, you know, him having to be on medication. What was his backstory? What was he suffering? You know, so it is important too, not only to have police reform, but to have, you know, people who are experts at these type of incidences to also be put in place for the black community in terms of mental health, because they seem to not really talk about that much. Mental health is a big issue in the black community, and a lot of people have a lot of mental issues, crises, things that we wouldn't believe that they maybe they can't afford to find the right help, or they don't have the right resources, or they don't know who to go to, and they struggle with these incidences, and then that's another reason why they wind up in some situations that are unfortunate, because people are not ready, available to help assist in these type of situations. So, and then two, there's no reason for them to be laughing at these parents when you can see that they have this look in their face of desperation, of wanting and seeking the correct help that their son needed, and not only for the son but for his family that is now grieving because they're without a father or without a husband, and apparently he was struggling, he was going through something. And so people usually, what I do notice about um, black community situations like this is they tend to joke about it, or they don't have empathy about people's circumstance, their health issues, or what is going on. They just kind of paint this picture like we've seen down here of all of his negative incidences and clashes. But there had to have been something behind that. We are hearing now that this man, he was going through health issues mentally. And so those things need to be really held accountable for in terms of seeking not just reform, but you need also you need mental health counselors. You need like the medication this guy was taking. You know, how many times did he take it? Did he have to have it on regular? Was it a lifelong thing that he had to take? You know, do you have to switch up your medicine? Just like, you know, some people when they have blood pressure, high blood pressure, they have to switch their medicine because maybe the body gets adjusted to that medicine and it no longer really works. So they have to switch the medicine so that it will be more effective. And so there's a lot of things, a lot of questions as to what could have taken place. But we could do that all day long. But now we're looking at the police being held accountable for their actions. And so that's probably more than likely why people are in an uproar, is that why did you have to shoot him at all? Why did you have to shoot him that many times? There's a lot of questions around that. And so those are the same questions we had for a lot of other incidents that happened prior to this. But having said that, I'm gonna let this video go right here. But this is yet another situation. I want to be sure to say that I'm made aware that earlier today I was witnessing that some of the most popular social media outlets were pretty much being put on a spotlight, and they were having a hearing with the Senate today about freedom of speech. And so I'm not surprised if they start focusing on the different videos and the different content that is being put on Twitter, that is on even the news. I feel as though we're coming into a time where they almost want to censor people's thoughts. They almost want to censor people's freedom of speech. And so it is a certain select group that want to do this because they don't want to hear the truth about how people are hurting, how people are feeling, how people's emotions are pretty much behaving because of incidences that they seem to put together, and they realize that they share a similar commonality, that there is certain people that seem to be targeted more often by law enforcement, and the way they are targeted, and that is the issue at hand here. That's the reason why people react the way they do, because they feel that this is unjust. And it seems to be people, now we're noticing people who speak out on issues. We're even seeing now people who are protesters that may not even be black, they may be white, because they speak out on the issues and they see what's going on, and they stand with the family in these issues. They become targeted. We see black people being targeted. We see Hispanic people, Latino people being targeted. We see women being targeted in these incidences where, when they speak out on issues that are unjust, issues in communities of people of color, that they begin to focus on whether they even have the right of freedom of speech. And so these are some really heavy-duty issues, and this is yet another situation here we're looking at where it's a similar incident. Only he didn't have a gun, he had a knife, but there's a saying, they say don't bring a knife to a gunfight. Sort of a saying. This guy really wasn't like he was in the fight mode, he was in crisis mode. And so he needed help. And he didn't get the help that he needed. And had he have gotten the help that he needed, maybe he would have still been here. And that is the reason why people are reacting the way they are. And so it's unfortunate. And I'm not surprised if we don't see other incidences like this happen, because that is how people are feeling right now. And so I don't know that they understand. It's just the way they paint these pictures, they make it look like they're so unempathetic to other people's circumstance. If it was in another situation, in another socioeconomic background of people, they would have, maybe they have the resources, they have money to get health counselors or EMT that have restraint. Maybe they're trained medically, and they're trained to physically be able to restrain people in situations such as Walter Wallace. That sounds like what the parents were asking. Why? Why is our son dead? And you can see the looks on their face. But anyway, I'm going to let this video go. What do you think about this? Even you have, music entertainers and stars and people that are speaking out on all of these issues. Nobody was this political seemed like this year they were up the ante on politics in a way that is not healthy. And so, having said that, I'm going to let this video go. We were hoping not to see any more of these type of stories, not to see any more of these incidences, but yet we're seeing a lot more of these incidences happen as well. And that's what's also hurting, to see more and more people that are voiceless, or people that need help in so many ways, being gunned down in the streets. And I'm going to let this go. Like, comment, subscribe, and hopefully we won't see any more of these incidences. Thank you for listening.